Hi, and welcome to Couch Theater. I'm Stefan, your host, and I'm joined by two guests. We have Cassi.
Hey, dudes.
And Tyler.
Hey.
And this time we're watching a movie called Mother with an exclamation point at the end. And it is on both Hulu and Amazon right now.
I'm not a really big fan of the retcon of the M being capitalized. I swear it was lowercase forever, and now suddenly I'm seeing it capitalized everywhere, and it personally offends me.
I know, it's like bell hooks, all lowercase. Like, what's up with that? No, I have no idea. So actually, do tell what makes the lowercase so,
we'll actually talk
irresistible.
about that after we watch the movie.
Okay.
But because you know the significance of that. But I don't know. It's just something like that. It's like writing, the band Against Me without the exclamation point. It's like it's part of the name, I had written so many Reddit posts about it with all lowercase with the exclamation point, and now they've just made me look like an idiot.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's something in the template with those. Just can't not capitalize the first part. Yeah. Okay, so I don't usually talk about the directors in these or the writers, but I feel like it's kind of important for this movie because this movie is different. It's weird and unapologetically so. In fact, I think a lot of people may have skipped this movie because they've heard so many negative things about it, or the only people telling them that it's a really interesting movie are their crazy friends. But I really urge you to give it a try. Anyways, okay, so the director is Darren Aronofsky, and I'll throw out some movies that I've written down beforehand. We got Pi, Black Swan, Requiem for a Dream, which just thinking about that movie gives me the shivers.
Yes.
The Wrestler, I don't know if you've seen that one, and The Fountain, which is a little bit older.
I think I've seen The Fountain and I've seen Requiem for a Dream. I have not seen this movie, and it's not because I've been a little intimidated by this movie. You guys know I'm into some weird stuff. I like weird movies. But even my weirdo friends, you two, have told me how intense this movie is. And so it's been one of the ones that I've been a little hesitant to watch because I just feel like I haven't been... whenever I do sit down for a movie, I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for that one. And so I'm kind of super stoked that you guys are having me sit down and watch it because I've been really wanting to watch it for so long, but I've been a little intimidated.
I'm really wanting to see you react to this movie, to be honest.
You've been telling me that for a long time.
Yeah, well, it's a thing. Of the movies that I've seen on this list, I haven't seen Pi or The Wrestler, but I've heard The Wrestler is amazing, so that really does seem like one I should check out. I hear Pi is a little on the weird side, too.
We don't like weird stuff here.
No, not at all. Black Swan is really, really great, but it's a little bit more straightforward, like Requiem for a Dream. This movie is a little bit more like The Fountain, because you're just kind of trying to figure it out for most of it.
Okay.
And even on the second watch, Stefan and I are still trying to figure it out.
So I know that it was one of the reasons that I think it hit poorly when it first came out is because it was advertised as a horror movie. And I know that it's not that.
Yeah, no, it's not the kind of horror movie that the trailer describes for sure.
Okay.
Because the trailer shows off almost like a slasher movie or something like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how a lot of the movies that this podcast already has on it are okay, it's kind of like a horror movie.
Yeah, that's been something I've noticed when I've been talking with people is that these are our type of movies. You knew that when we first met. Stefan, I've grown up with him. So these are movies that I love. And so whenever I say I like horror movies, everybody's like, oh, they're so cheesy. I'm like, you're kind of watching the wrong ones. And so I think that was probably because I remember when I did see the original trailer that it did come off as more traditional style horror.
No, and in fact, I'd say it is horrifying, and you're at the edge of your seat almost the whole movie, but it's not really a horror movie.
Yeah.
I don't even know what you'd really call it. I think the closest that you can get to would be drama, but that's so flat.
Yeah.
And that would probably bring the wrong crowd too.
Which is hilarious. It's drama. There's no emotion in it. Yeah. So this movie is unapologetically weird.
Okay.
And I think just going into it, understanding that. I think if you're imagining like a normal story of any kind or events to follow in any logical sense, then you're not going to enjoy the movie. I think you just need to go into it, like take the plunge and just accept what happens and just follow it all the way through.
Yeah, my first time seeing it, I'd literally just heard, there's this new horror movie coming out. Oh, it's not a horror movie, and everybody who saw it is really mad at it. I'm gonna go watch that, and that's like all the information I went in with, and I loved it.
Well, it's kind of funny because I've heard about it a lot from both of you and from Kevin as well, our friend. And usually you guys tell me more stuff to expect. And like, I literally have no idea what to expect from this except for that, basically. And so I'm kind of excited and that it's intense, but I'm okay with intense. So
good. So I guess to go along with that, it is very allegorical in many of the things that are happening. So we're not going to allude to what those allegories would be, but we'll talk about them after, of course.
Okay.
So, and I don't think Tyler and I had been talking about it before. I think it is important not to focus on those allegories at all. I think, and I may just take this part out because once you say don't do something, you're immediately going to do it.
He will. I won't. I'm easily molded.
But
I'm a free spirit.
Yeah.
I'm not a free spirit at all. So rigid. By the rules only.
And like I've done the last few times, I think maybe starting with a couple questions. So some of the sub-themes are ownership, attachment, and control. And to ask the question, it would be what makes things ours? And not just things, but people. And how are they ours? Why are they ours? Like, what makes them ours?
So that's interesting because when you first said ownership, my brain went, are we talking more like physical, like this is my physical item here, that's mine, or are we talking more like emotional? Like, because like when I talk about you guys, I'm like, oh, my people, and it's not like I'm like, oh, I own you guys, I just belong with you guys, like you're who I belong with, but it's not like I'm exclaiming ownership to you. And I definitely don't feel like people own other people, but I know that there are people who feel like they have some sort of entitlement to another person's self. So for me, if you're talking about more like along those lines, I guess it's kind of like just self things. Like somebody is not going to give you that part of them. Like they'll be like, oh yeah, like I'll accept that you and I are, what we are. I accept that we have some sort of connection, but I am my own person. And it's usually another person deciding that they have ownership of somebody else. And so it's not like the original subject is like, oh yeah, I'm yours. Like, I mean, they say that like in like if you want to get romantic, but in reality, nobody wants that. And when somebody does decide that they own somebody else, it's never the other person's option. It's always something that they build up in their own head that they think that they're entitled to something.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I do think that there's a lot of things tied into that where just having a woman's perspective on the movie would be interesting because this is the kind of movie that really touches on your feelings and like deep down like gut reactions to things. So you might have a different kind of experience than Stefan and I do watching this.
I guess to go back on the subject of ownership, especially with people, when we talk about friends, like my friends and my family, even though you're not indicating ownership, there are certain things that you almost feel like you have control over with people and certain things that you expect them to do and expect them not to do. And I almost feel like that's almost like a type of ownership. Like you feel like when people act outside of what you expect them to, that you're losing control and you're losing your ownership over them. It doesn't feel right. It feels wrong. I don't know, just a different perspective to look at.
Okay.
When you say things about your people, like my friends and my family and my
my expectations are I don't know
that is perfect. And like I've always said on this podcast, you shouldn't have expectations when you go into movies, or at least you should curb them to a particular angle, not listen to reviews other than mine, and not watch trailers, especially this one. The trailer will totally mislead you. I think, what is the synopsis for this movie? It's like...
oh, God. It's something like a man and woman find their peaceful homestead disturbed when uninvited guests overstay their welcome or something like that, which is true, but a dramatic understatement.
Yeah.
And almost gives off the impression of a movie like The Strangers, and it's not that either. So it's...
No.
I don't know.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess if you've gleaned anything, it's like just maybe get your headspace and confused, and then you'll be halfway there, right?
Hey, I'm usually confused.
Yeah. You don't even have to do anything.
Yes.
All right, so I think that's about it.
I have one
please.
mechanical thing. Something that I really, really, really love about this movie is the camera angles. Paying attention to who's in frame and where they are in the frame and how much, I guess, screen time they're given, how much priority they're given, whatever scene, however the shot is blocked, is like so incredibly important. And this might just be me imprinting things, but I really feel like that's a thing. You can tell me after you've seen it if you agree with me, but I really feel like it's pretty important.
Well, I'm interested to hear your points of view on the shots, because I'm not quite as versed, or I don't look out as much for the shots, but
well, I told you the general, like, the theme. So,
yeah.
You should like, I don't know, try to see if that fits, because it's the third time now you've seen this movie.
Yeah.
That's a good time to like focus on little things like that.
Yes.
See, I think this is fun because Stefan, you always bring out more of like the like, I guess, like emotional side of it, and Tyler, you always bring out a lot of technical stuff, and I find it very interesting.
Oh,
look at those blushing faces.
like peanut butter and jelly.
Get out of here.
How could you see it through our beards?
Such magnificent beards.
Anyways, all right, so now we're going to go watch Mother, which is not only on Hulu, but on Amazon. It's funny, I think we went to Amazon before and it wasn't there, but now it is. So go to Hulu or Amazon and watch Mother, and then come on back and listen to the second half of this wonderful podcast.
Don't tell me how to live my life.
Gonna.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we're back. That was a movie.
That was one of those.
Sure was.
So I'm supposed to go first.
Well, both Tyler and I have seen this movie, and we just want to get, an unadulterated opinion.
Well, I'm still like kind of processing it. So that was intense. There was a lot going on. It definitely wasn't what I expected, which is funny because I didn't expect much because I was kind of told not to expect anything.
No, I mean, that's the thing. I don't think there's anything that you can really expect from this movie. There's no way to prepare yourself for this movie, other than to say,
basically expecting raw emotion out of you right now.
I can definitely see why you said it'd be interesting to hear a woman's take on it from earlier. So I can definitely see where that came from. And I'm still just kind of processing how it made me feel. Like, it was really intense. I have feelings or opinions as to what it all meant, but I still don't know. Like, I'm not super solid in them just yet. And I guess you guys don't know what it meant either, so haha. But I can see why it wasn't necessarily accepted widely. But it was also really, really beautiful and jarring, and it triggered some anxiety, which is not something I usually deal with on a regular basis. I'm pretty, for those of you who don't know me, I'm pretty chill and laid back, so I don't usually do anxiety.
Can't confirm.
And so, yeah, I'm just like on edge, and they did a really, really good job of just keeping you on edge throughout the entire movie, and not really, even just from the beginning, just not letting you feel very comfortable. Yeah, I'm just processing it.
What about the beginning made you feel uncomfortable? Like, what was the first time where you were just like, all right, well.
I think their interactions. What were their names?
Well, I think that's actually a great place to start.
They don't have names. So we never learned them.
We can go over the characters a little bit. Yeah, so Jennifer Lawrence's character is just called Mother.
Okay, and then the poet?
The poet is him.
Yeah, and that's...
Javier Bardem.
Oh, dreamy.
Thank you.
So dreamy.
Gosh, he looks like a creep to me, honestly.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, he's got that kind of 50-50. I mean, especially if you've seen No Country for Old Men.
Oh,
then
yeah.
he's just cemented in your mind as that dude.
Oh, yeah, that haircut.
And then they did have that like incredible opening scene where it was just like her being burned. But I didn't think too much of that because, like, I mean, they wanted you to be uncomfortable during that. But, like, just the interactions between Mother and the poet, you could tell that she felt safe and felt warm around him, but he never gave off that, like, during his entire interactions and his entire screen time. The level of love that she's supposed to have for him and the level of adoration she's supposed to have for him is not something that we witness why. And so that was just pretty interesting to me.
And like, why does she love him so much? Okay,
yeah, he's a very handsome guy, but, you know, we're not just falling in love with people because of their looks. We're not, like, giving them our entire selves at the end of it because of looks.
Yeah.
We don't see him being necessarily romantic with her. We don't see him providing safety for her. And so the fact that she's supposed to just be obsessed and giving herself up to him, we never see why she's doing that.
Okay. So I guess let's talk about love then, right?
Oh,
that is absolutely like why we kind of wanted you to just give us a raw reaction, because that's not really anything that we've talked about when talking about this movie beforehand.
Yeah. It's
really taken for granted, the amount of love shared between them. They tell you that they love each other and you go, okay, it's a movie. The movie says they love each other. But you're right. It's not demonstrated.
They don't tell us that he loves her. They tell us that she loves him.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's interesting that all the affectionate moments are like cut out or they go to white. Like the first time that you see them have this really intimate moment is when she conceives the child, supposedly, and it's like violent and scary, and then like she like accepts it, and then it just goes to white.
Yeah,
and it's like nothing happened. It's weird.
It's serene.
Yeah.
But given the build up to it, and, you know, not judging for anybody's preferences, but given the build up to it, that wasn't necessarily a serene type of affection or a serene type of intimacy.
It's disturbing.
Yeah. And so the fact that she just wakes up so serenely and her heart's at ease, it still just doesn't lead to a reason why she's feeling the way she does about him, which I guess can say a lot about a lot of things, but
actually something about that scene in particular when she like rolls over and starts talking to him, something about the expressions that she's making and the lighting of that scene really make her just look like childish and angelic. Like there's a certain level of like purity and innocence that's on her face that just like you don't quite see that level of sugary sweet happiness on her face at any other point in the movie. Even after she's, you know, had her baby, like it's more human. The kind of emotion that she has on her face when she conceives the baby just seems different to me.
Well, I'd say that her wants and her love are kind of sort of intertwined in that pure sense, right? Like she just wants to have her husband and her house and for everything to be peaceful and simple. But it obviously isn't going to be that way because that's not what him wants.
Well, and we also don't know her backstory. We know nothing about her. We know very little about him, but we do know that he's a poet. We do know that that was his house, and we know where he got that beautiful crystal from now. And so you can tell when what was her name? Did she have a name? Nobody had a name.
Who? Mother?
The other mother.
Woman is her name.
Woman. Okay. So we don't know anything about Mother's past. We know nothing. We know that he was in that house and it burned down and it was his house. And we know when Woman was talking to Mother, based on Mother's reaction, it was pretty obvious to tell that there was something about another wife there, another person there, because Mother didn't necessarily have the best reaction to it. She just had like kind of a taken back thing where it hurt her. And so based on a lot of things, that we know that him is a poet. We know that he lived at that house probably with another wife that Mother knew about. But we have no basis of Mother's past. Like there's nothing inferring what her history has been. And so after we see this next beautiful woman that he has at the end of it, you have to like kind of think if he's going after people who don't have anything else.
Well, so I think a lot of the things that you're saying are spot on. And that's where we're going to get into like the allegories or what the movie's trying to get at, and the more like mystical things that are happening. Because this movie, I think Tyler brought it up first, and I definitely agree. There is an overarching like metaphor, and all the characters are allegorical representations of things, but it's probably one of the most boring parts of the movie. I think it really shines when you look at everything else. But it's also kind of like, eh.
I'm curious to hear what that metaphor is, because there's a lot of metaphors in there actually that I see. And so I'm very curious as to hear what the overarching one is.
I don't think that the most, like, I guess, in your face one, and the one that the director talks about and the one we'll get to, I actually honestly do kind of want to do what Stefan had in mind, and that was focus on characters first before getting into the whole story of it.
Then let's do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Structure.
Let's do that.
What? Keeping us in line.
But yeah. I'll save that thought for when we get to that part.
Yes, I stopped you for a reason.
Yeah.
So I guess, okay, so to focus back on just the characters and like what exactly is happening just on the very surface is you have Mother who loves him, and then you have him who maybe loves Mother, but seemingly just kind of uses her. But what he really loves is, what it feels like to me that he loves is his work and adoration
Yes.
from not only Mother, but more
And
specifically his fans.
anyone.
Yeah. Which is seemingly why he creates the work, is to get these fans, to get adoration. And then there's everyone else. And everyone else really just loves him and loves themselves, it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
So that's as far as love goes. I don't know. The interactions there are kind of interesting. Everyone is very simplistic in that way. It's interesting how simplistic things are in this movie, and yet so chaotic and weird.
Yeah.
Everybody is pure id. Like, just that one thing. It's really kind of funny in certain parts.
Mm-hmm.
It's like funny and just anxiety inducing, and it just kind of like trades parts. Like, there are some parts that we laugh at, like just exploring.
Right.
That's so funny to me. But then, at a certain point, people are literally ripping the walls off of the house because they need pieces of it. And that's before we get into, like, shells blowing the house into pieces. Like, it's crazy the kinds of motivation you see from people from the very get-go. Just the regular kind of inconsiderate attitude of man when he enters the picture, and then just the gall that woman shows with pretty much every action that she takes. Like, she's upsetting with how openly full of disregard she is for literally anybody else's feelings, especially Mother.
Well, honestly, Man was the same way.
Yeah, they were both awful in that way.
I don't think anybody really shows any kind of concern for Mother other than him, and it's really like,
Oh, that
backhanded
doesn't even
at
count.
most.
That doesn't even count. That was all self-serving.
Yeah. No, agreed.
She hardly even shows concern for herself. Like, she vocalizes it a couple times, but even when she's vocalizing it, she's worried about like her house, and then she's worried about the baby
Or him.
and she's hardly ever worrying about herself. Like, the one time we see her worrying about herself is because she's worried about getting her baby to safety. She's, she hasn't had the baby yet. She's pregnant, and she's like, I'm pregnant. I need to get out of here. And that's not even for her, because she already went through something, not to that sort of extreme the first time, but something pretty intense. And she had, her only concern was the house then. So she's not even showing a whole lot of, care about herself or like making sure that she's taken care of.
Well, it's funny because I think there are only two people in the movie that actually show any, sympathy or empathy for Mother. And that's that random soldier who sees that she's pregnant and like tries to get her to safety and then gets his face blown off.
Specifically his mouth.
Yeah, his jaw.
He's silenced.
Whoa. And then randomly enough, the brother who kills his brother, the son of man and woman.
Is that a Cain and Abel reference?
We'll get to that. But yeah, Domhnall Gleeson, I believe is how you say that guy's hilarious name.
That's his name, huh?
Yeah.
I really like that guy, actually.
Murderous Brother?
Yeah.
Well, not the character, but
his name is Murderous Brother going forward.
Murderous Brother is okay. It's very identifiable.
Next movie he stars in, starring Murderous Brother.
Oh, look, it's Murderous Brother.
In Star Wars.
Was that the Weasley boy?
Yeah.
Ah, Weasley boy's there.
He has such a good American accent, though, that honestly it kind of makes him hard to recognize once he starts talking.
I thought I knew him from somewhere.
He's got that face, but yeah.
Damn those gingers.
Well, okay, so he murders his brother, and then he makes up this like you saw, like it wasn't my fault, and then the parents come in, they're like, "What did you do?" It's like, "This is your fault," and he just leaves, which was it's like kind of hilarious, if not out of it at the time. You're like, what the fuck did you just say?
I'm not even going to lie to you. I kind of forgot about the murdering brother things until you guys brought it up again. There's so much that has happened since that time.
Like way before shit hits the fan.
I know. I'm just like, oh, wow, things are crazy. Little did I know.
There was a murder.
There was one single murder in that house.
But right before we see his character for the last time, he like comes back to the house to get what I don't think is his wallet. I think it's his dad's wallet.
Yeah,
that he comes back for. He like kind of sympathizes, or not. He tries to empathize with her really quick. Like, you know, they left you here all alone. It's really messed up. And then he's like, "Good luck," and leaves. Like he knows more than she does.
It's almost like he was pointing it out to her. Like, hey, you shouldn't be okay with the way you're being treated.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody else in the entire movie ever does that. Like, what does that say about everybody else?
Well, I guess like to us, the star was Mother. Like to us, like that's who the movie's focused on. But if you're looking at everybody else, she was just a side character. She was like, you know, if they're there for him. They're there. Everybody's there for him, and he's there for him. So if you were not watching this as a movie, and if you were just part of that anarchy, he would be the star. But to us, Mother was the star. But she was meek, and she was very timid, and she didn't say a whole lot unless things got way out of hand. And so she probably would have been a very easy person to forget about in real life.
Yeah, I suppose so.
And it is kind of funny the way, I'm just going to get into this because it's one of my favorite things about this movie. She is constantly most of the shot. Just most of that movie, she is either the focus, or if it's something in the background, like another character or something, the back of her head is taking up like a third of the screen. It's so heavily focused on her the entire movie that it just feels impossible to not be focused on anything but her perspective, which really immerses you when shit starts hitting the fan, because it's like she has a camera mounted to her waist that's just orbiting her the entire time, and you can just constantly see everything around her and her reactions to it. And that's probably why Stefan pointed out that there's no soundtrack to this movie, and the soundtrack is kind of Jennifer Lawrence's screams. Like, oof. Like for that whole sequence where she's protecting her unborn child and shit's going down, it's like 30 minutes of her basically just trying to survive a war zone in her house. Yeah. And it's just her terror is all that you really have to sit with you for that entire time.
Well, okay, to unpack that a little bit, as far as her being most of the screen, I mean, so even though it's all about him, right? Him and his work. I mean, she really is the inspiration for his work, right? Like, he's not getting anything done. And then some people come to the house, and he's still not really getting anything done. And then finally there's a moment of passion. Even though it's really weird and awkward, there's this passion between them, and then the conception happens.
Hey, as far as movies go, that was like the most romantic passion.
Okay.
Movies are not exactly typical positive representations.
Starting to question this friendship now. They conceive a child, and then immediately after he writes his work. And then he says, it wasn't just you, it was all those people, and then you, and then the baby. But I mean, that's still like mostly her, but she never gets acknowledged for that.
It wasn't her.
Or respected for that.
It was the baby. It wasn't her.
Well, I mean, the baby doesn't even exist yet.
But the concept
it's all her at that point, right?
No, he doesn't. I don't think he cares about her even a little bit. He just.
Oh, I'm not. Well,
so he wants the baby, and that's what's sparking it. Because if it was just her, then it wouldn't have been an issue. She was there all along.
right.
The only thing that changed out of that was the fact that she was like, "Oh, hey, I'm pregnant. You're gonna have an offspring now that apparently you can just, sacrifice." But it wasn't like her at all. Like, he didn't have the inspiration until this third non-technically existent part shows up. And then all of a sudden it's there. The inspiration is there. And that's because that's part him. It's him infiltrating her.
Interesting. I don't know. I think so. She's the inspiration for the work, and the people, even though they're there and they may influence the inspiration, I think they're just there for adoration.
Yeah. I don't think they're influencing it. They're like his hypey, oh yeah, go you. We love you.
He's like, yeah, I did this. I did this for you.
Yeah.
I feel as though he probably cares equally not about mother and the baby. I feel like they're both fuel for him. So that's I think why I might be leaning more towards the side of that. She is the reason that he had the thing. He created the art, made the work. Did they refer to it as anything? They
say he's a poet, so I
just
assume it's poetry of some kind.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think of any actual like proper nouns that they would have used to describe it. I think it's just it. They just refer to it. Is that it? Is that the original?
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Like they're not specific about it.
No.
I guess like what I had actually said before about the way she looks in that shot, how it's like unnatural looking almost, and how happy and light everything was.
Yeah.
That's literally the moment where he's like, boom, inspiration.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's, this is the kind of movie, it seems like everything's on purpose, but that also means that you make lots of inferences about things that aren't actual things. Yeah.
Well, so we were talking about purity. I think that was supposed to be like a pure moment, this love and then having a child. It's supposed to be like the purest thing, right? Having a family.
Yeah.
Well, you brought up child sacrifice.
Did I write child sacrifice up there?
I brought up child sacrifice.
No, but it fits into like the whole thing.
It does, yeah. So first, I'd like to talk about the more mystical stuff, representational things. So the crystal, right? Or the diamond. So what is that? So you can go over the things that we know. We know that it came from inside of Mother, and he literally calls it her love. So it's her love. And then he puts it on a pedestal, and that restarts everything. And so in that respect, it seems to me that her love literally fuels the next cycle. And so we see this different woman, right? Well, in the beginning, it's not Jennifer Lawrence either. It's another woman, and even another woman. Mm-hmm. So this cycle has been happening for who knows how long. And this diamond, the love that's resetting it, it's like Mother's last gift, it feels like, to him, to fuel the next home and the next cycle. It breathes life into everything, the house, and then it even creates a new mother who's just as pure and naive as the last one. Oh.
You said a lot of things.
I did. Sorry. Several times throughout the movie, Mother places her head against the wall as sort of like a calming effect, and she sees inside of the wall. Her eyes are gorgeous in those parts. I don't know what it is, but it's they make her eyes really pop. And then she sees into the wall, and there's this heart beating, which slowly rots throughout the whole movie and finally stops beating. And I guess my idea of the heart is it's inside the house, and the house that was burnt down, right, that she rebuilt by herself. It doesn't look like him helped at all. So the house is literally like an extension of her body. She never goes outside, and that heart is her heart that's beating. She is the house. And so when things get destroyed and people disrespect the house, they're literally disrespecting her. Even if the house wasn't her, a slight on the house is a slight on her because she made it. It's hers, even though it's not hers.
I have feelings on this.
Okay, go ahead.
So it was made clear that she did want children, and it was him that did not want children. And so for me, she was filling that void of not having children by renovating or fixing or creating this home out of this place that she knows meant a lot to him. And so to me, the house was her home. The heart was her creating a home out of this house. And so it was basically like a child. It was her child at that moment because she didn't have one. And so it wasn't necessarily like when she saw them doing things that were going to hurt this house, this thing that she created and she put her heart and soul into, then it was people literally dismantling her child, which we saw. Yeah,
literally.
That's a really good word to describe what happens to that child.
Dismantled.
But that's kind of what I picked up from, like, basically from the very beginning, that home, that house that she was rebuilding and putting all of that effort into, that was her child. And when people were coming in, they were destroying or they were disrespecting or they were harming her child.
Yeah, I like that just about as much as like the house basically being like her as well. You know, both kind of apply. That's something really interesting about this movie is like, I feel like no matter what framework you pick, you can like apply another one to it that would fit just as well, but in like a different way. There's a lot of different things going on in this movie where like one answer I feel like doesn't cover everything, because there is like a one answer more or less, but I don't feel like it covers everything, and there's a whole lot more to be said. It's kind of disappointing that when people talk about this movie, I feel like they really do stick on that one thing that we're going to save to the very end.
Yeah. No, I agree. We talked about this before where it's like nothing really fits completely. Even what it's supposed to be doesn't fit completely. And so it's a very different experience for every person.
Well, we've talked about this before. We all in the same spot, and then you and I multiple times, Stefan, that it's subjective. It's fiction. It's art. It's subjective. So everybody's going to take away something else from it. So that's what makes it great. And so when there is one specific thing that it's about, it kind of makes it less special.
Yeah.
It limits what people think about it.
Yeah. And it also makes certain things make not as much sense because you get too focused on them. Like there are two specific elements in this movie that really confuse me. And maybe it's because I'm stupid. But
that's true.
Okay, yes. Then the nod was enough. You didn't have to agree on air.
I wanted them to hear.
Okay. Maybe the heart in the toilet is just on the nose, is all that is. It's just an on the nose representation.
Oh, I hate that part.
I could have done without that. I don't think it added to the movie at all.
And then also the yellow tonic was very confusing.
What the heck is that?
The turmeric water?
I'm sorry. Did you just bring some homeopathic shit into this room to explain what that was?
Turmeric is a spice. You put it in rice and it's so nice.
Do you also put it in water and drink it when you have a headache?
I don't.
Do people?
I don't know.
Oh, so you just made that up.
Well,
that was all bullshit.
Of course it was. But no, it looked like that's the color turmeric turns when you add it to things.
You said that so
you made it sound
convincingly.
like it was. Oh, that was her turmeric powder. She keeps it in the medicine cabinet.
Well, that's what turmeric looks like. Have you guys never seen turmeric before?
Not in water like that.
Stefan used to buy turmeric in like bulk.
It helps with digestion.
She was having indigestion. This makes so much sense now.
She was having a panic attack.
Indigestion.
See, the overarching allegory is constipation.
Shit happens.
Sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so what else can I bring up before we go into the big thing?
Talking about if the house is a representation of herself, then the way that whenever she would have her episodes, mostly things she would touch, but also just things the camera focused on, would kind of like Silent Hill up a bit. They would go back to being like all ashy and decaying and broken, just kind of like in waves. It is like retaining old injuries. That shows that the level of development that has been put into that house is not quite as permanent or foundational as Mother would like to believe it is. It shows that it's just as fragile as the movie would then later show that it is when people come in and start ripping the walls out of the house by, with crowbars and stuff. You get allusions to that like at the very start of the movie. As soon as she starts having those moments of freaking out, just things just go right back to the way they were.
Well, and it's fragile not in a way that a house is, but like a body is.
Yeah.
Because you see that spot where the brother was murdered and there's all that blood on the floor. It decays the floor and goes down to the foundation. But then later, after she's repaired it and she covers it with a mat, like it ends up sprouting blood again, like that wound festers, even though it's been replaced with completely new floorboards. It's like an old scar or a memory that just like keeps tearing. It never heals properly. And when I was thinking about that with the floorboards, and I was thinking about Mother and how she's constantly pissed when people are like painting her walls or trying to repair things. And of course that floorboard where she's repaired, like she covers it because it's new and it doesn't look right. Like it doesn't fit right. And it made me think of this old Greek parable, Theseus's ship. Have you heard that particular philosophical construct?
Teach
Have
the
you?
class.
Okay. So the basic idea is, you have this ship, Theseus's ship, and over time things happen to it. A floorboard goes bad and they have to replace it, or the rudder falls off and they put a new one on. And over time, more and more of the ship is replaced. So at what point would you say that the ship is not Theseus's ship? Until half of the ship has been replaced, until 90%, until there's nothing left except one little splinter. At what point is the ship not the ship anymore? And so it feels like to me that in this respect, in Mother's respect in the house, like she replaces the floorboards, but it's like a scar. She hates it because it's a representation of destroying something that's hers, like a distillation of it. Because if you take something away and replace it, it's not the same in her mind.
The way you just described that actually really makes me think about the concept of ownership or attachment. Because yes. I would say a pretty literal answer to that question of when does the ship become a new ship. And I think it's when they change the name of the ship. It's still going to be Theseus' ship because that's what everybody refers to it as. That's what it's known as. It's the ship. So in that way, her house is her house and she's insisting it's her house. But everybody else throughout the movie is constantly taking that ownership away from her. And in that way, it stops being her house when all these other people are there and they're like, oh, this isn't yours, it's mine, or it's this, or it's that. It becomes all these other different things, and none of it is her house anymore.
I like that a lot. It's like a reminder, that scar is a reminder that her house may not be her house. Ooh.
But that was also in John Dies at the End?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Except he doesn't call it Theseus's ship.
No, it's the axe.
Yeah, it's the axe.
It's the axe.
All right, so we've reached the time, I think. So we can talk about
Bum, bum, bum.
Oh man, you want to talk? Wait, before we completely move on from this topic.
Yeah.
So I've always mentioned this because it just is a thing, and that's for me at least, like the hardest thing to watch in this whole movie really is at the end when they just start kicking the shit out of her. Like, are harder for me than the anxiety-inducing experience of them ripping the house apart, harder than them killing the baby and eating its flesh. Like, the way that that's done is a lot softer. But when they start like attacking her, it's so brutal and in your face that just like it's the part that like I don't look forward to while watching the movie. Like, it's that scene for this movie for me. Like,
because we've seen it all through her perspective. So we're like her at this point. We're seeing this all. We're feeling it through her emotions. And then they just destroy her.
Well, to go back to the camera angles, there are some times where it's like she's like standing up and the camera will like stand up as if it's her head in her place. So it's like we are literally her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're definitely meant to be her and feel what she's feeling.
Yeah. So when, people start, brutally hitting us and kicking us and
ripping our clothes off
and choking, then yeah, we're gonna be pretty uncomfortable about it.
Yeah, that was just really well done, and is like a physical extension of them, beating the shit out of her house. It's just
they finally got to her, like.
And with the doorknob too, I was thinking about that doorknob the whole movie. It was so significant.
It was. I thought that too. I'm like, that doorknob's back.
Get rid of that thing.
Why is it still here?
Oh man, and the way that he rips it off the door too is so intimidating. Like every time he just the way he just boom, ain't nobody going in this room no more.
All right. So do you have any idea?
Any idea about what?
The overarching allegory.
You
kind of touched on it earlier.
Allegory, okay, so it's biblical, and he's Satan, is what I was thinking. I mean, there's literally a picture of him with horns and
God.
Shit. God, okay.
But close.
I mean,
that's.
It feels that
good
way.
Interpretation of
also,
things.
that was a little lot in your face.
Yeah, it was very blunt.
Yeah, it was. I guess I get what you guys were saying earlier when it's if that's all we were wrapping this movie up to, then I'd be pretty disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, you could say it in one sentence, okay, so him is God, mother is Mother Nature, and everybody else was humanity.
Yep.
Done.
And the references to the Bible are so on the nose. Like, a man shows up. He's got a weird cut in the back of his ribs. Suddenly a woman shows up. And then they have kids and one of them kills the other one. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And it's it's a little much. And
I missed the rib thing. That's hilarious.
When this movie came out, there were two discussions about it. One, what the fuck was that? Oh my God, how dumb. And two, people who actually were interested in this movie and wanted to learn more about it would go and listen to things that were being said about it. And one of the most vocal speakers about the movie was the director, Darren Aronofsky, also known as a perpetual 17-year-old who happens to just make really good movies. His perspective on things is usually really strangely shallow, even considering the depth of the movies. It's almost like he just doesn't know how to talk about his own movies, despite how weirdly deep and interesting that they are. Because all this dude talks about is the biblical aspect of it, and he won't shut up about it. And so that became just the two conversations was look at this dumb, boring Bible allegory, or look at this dumb, not horror movie. And I feel like that's really why we structured this like this, because there's so much more cool stuff to talk about without having to bring in that. It's more interesting than just that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you Tyler, you had a better way of looking at it instead of the plain biblical.
I mean, I definitely softened more towards the biblical thing on rewatches, just because it really is so pervasive. It's not just the stuff that's super surface level. There are a few images that I probably didn't give a lot of significance to, and we didn't talk about these before. I honestly, it's been a while since I've been to church, but I believe it's Cain who kills Abel, and so when that happens, that's death is introduced into the world.
I know that it's Cain who killed Abel because I watched He Never Died.
Okay,
wow.
Thank you for confirming.
Another movie that we did on this podcast.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a really good podcast about it. You should listen sometime.
I don't listen to episodes that I'm not on. It's something that I hear from a lot of people who are on podcasts, and so I'm just kind of going to live by it.
Stupid.
You're missing out on a lot of podcasts. You're not on a lot of things.
So the frog coming out.
I'm actually,
or the toad.
I'm excited to hear you because you got all you had a reaction.
Okay, so I was trying to look up where the story actually comes from because the only thing I could remember was from that show, Dead Like Me. The very first episode, the very first thing that happens is this story about Frog and Toad and how Toad is told by God to watch this jar, and inside the jar is death, and it's God's no, make sure nobody opens that jar, and then for some reason Toad lends the jar to Frog, who proceeds to break it and death escapes, and then that's why everyone dies, is because Toad fucked up. I was trying to look it up online and see if I could find another reference, and the only other reference I could find was an obscure one that didn't really have any concrete reference to it. It just stated that it was an old African story, which is like, oh, thanks, an old African story. That's specific.
That narrows it down.
Did you Google old African story and tell it's what you found?
I sure did. Nothing. Yeah, so I don't know. I guess the Toad escaping was like death escaping was that, because I mean it immediately was, she was cleaning up the blood, she finds this like soft spot in the wall, and then it opens up and this Toad comes out. It's like death. Bummer. I
believe it's right before that is when she's doing dishes. She's cleaning up after everything that was in the kitchen, and a fly is buzzing against the window and drops the fuck dead.
And she's like, what?
Presumably, maybe around the time that that the one son actually died. Because, I don't know, it's just kind of a thing. The timing makes sense.
Yeah, okay, so it's right after that fucked up the kitchen with her lemonade shit.
So many lemons everywhere.
Like, there was like salt on the counter. It was like, what the fuck?
That lemonade was basically clear.
Yeah, it was vodka.
It was just vodka. There was just like a lemon segment on it.
She was on her second one.
Yeah.
I could probably hang out with her.
Like, let me go freshen these up. I mean, like, add more vodka to it?
I've become more comfortable with the biblical concept just on repeated watches because of that very reason. But the first time I watched it, despite spending so many years in church, I kind of didn't even think about the Bible because I was so invested in just the actual literal relationship between an auteur and a muse. Like, that's, if you want something that's like more literal than all the biblical stuff, it's really just him recycling women for inspiration and happiness and self-gratification. And I guess that's maybe reinforced about as much as the biblical part. So I wish it was kind of talked about a little more. That's why I'm happy that we're here talking about things now.
What was really interesting to me is how expectations of women are portrayed. When a woman is asking about kids, she's like, why don't you want kids? And she gets so abrupt about it, and she just inserts herself. And that is definitely something that I deal with on a regular basis, where people are like, oh, well, when are you having kids? Don't you want kids? Like, oh, just go have kids. And then people who are long-term relationships or who are married, it's something where people all of a sudden, like, we won't talk about sex. Like, you never talk about what goes on in the bedroom. However, it's okay when we're talking about when you're going to have kids. And she literally does that. She's like, okay, well, just go start making one right now. That would not be something that is okay to say to somebody who isn't married. That's not something that's okay to say. But since she is a married woman, then her expectation is that she needs to go have a child like right now, and there's no reason to wait. And if she's waiting for it, then that's just selfish and ridiculous of her, and that's just not something that's okay. And everybody has a right to say what's expected out of her.
I was like, that was her job. I mean, she was the homemaker. It's your job to fix the house and clean the dishes and make sure that everyone is, all guests are taken care of, and, clean up the shit that falls on the ground. And have the kids too.
Yeah, it's because that's been in a position where I've been, and I've heard those same things, and it's just jarring. It's just like how comfortable people are with saying what your life should be is just ridiculous. And I know that it probably happens to you guys as well, but it's just something that I feel like people are more willing to do to women, where it's just like, oh, well, this is what you have to do now. Like, your life isn't your own anymore. Now you're going to have to try and be a mom regardless of what you want. It was really interesting to see portrayed in a pretty unfavorable way, because I think everybody got uncomfortable during that scene. Everybody did. Even people that probably have done that to other people before got uncomfortable during that scene. So that was a very interesting scene to me. It was meaningful and uncomfortable, but very taken by that scene.
The expectations are constantly thrown onto Mother. Another one that we've talked plenty about is the expectation that pretty much most men seem to have of her in the movie. So many of them either looked at her like a piece of meat or talked to her like she belonged to them in some capacity. Like the guy who comes up and talks to her while they're breaking the sink. That dude had some words to say.
That's something where women are dealing with that on a regular basis, just going out to a bar, having a drink with friends, and then all of a sudden somebody thinks that they can come up and talk to them, and then when they are politely or reasonably turned down, you get attacked, you get called names. It's horrible. And so it was very interesting to see these different types of things that women deal with on a regular basis portrayed that way.
But yeah, expectations of her. Just about everybody had certain expectations of her. Even, I don't know if that really applies in the same lens or if it's just sort of the mechanical way the movie moves so quickly. Like the way that woman is like, could you at least put on something decent? Or something like that. Like she's in her own home and she comes down in pajamas and she's expected to be in formal attire.
Yeah.
I think God is kind of gay. Every time she goes to kiss him in the beginning and until like they actually conceive the child, he hates these pecks that she tries to kiss him and he's like, ugh. And then he's like wholeheartedly going out with this other guy, like, oh, let's go hiking. It's just, I'm trying to think of another instance where I was just like, what's going on with these guys? Did anyone else get that at all?
I got more like asexual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which fits with the whole God thing.
Yeah, whoa.
What
Not a sexual being.
What a loser.
Hey, it's skipped the actual having sex part.
Right.
Maybe it was immaculate conception.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was the thing. It was like the kissing didn't feel right, and then it just skipped to purity. Cut out all the dirty stuff.
I don't even think the passion felt right.
Yeah, the passion was weird.
Like none of that.
Well, because it was like,
and that's,
it happened right after violence, and then like she was trying to leave.
Yeah, that's like borderline rape.
Yeah,
that was definitely borderline rape.
But then she got into it, and it was weird.
I mean
that's why I said for a movie. Because in like, a rom-com or something like that would have been the most romantic and passionate sex ever.
Right.
But like, okay, so she said no. She pushed him away, said no. And I don't know.
You're probably on the right track considering the way that the movie treats that concept in every other scene.
It's not her decision. It's not something that she had a decision on. And she had clearly made the statement saying that she was missing that part of their relationship. And that could very well have been the only time it was offered to her. Yeah, technically she did get into it or start enjoying it, but it wasn't necessarily on her terms. It was only on his terms. And it wasn't something that she was willing for. And then basically what was the other option? To fight more and just have him press more, or to just give in? So that's borderline rape.
I think it fits into what like she's been trapped in.
Yeah.
Basically her whole life, if we're imagining that her life basically began, a couple mornings ago or something.
That's all we know about her life.
She is alive to love him. That is her purpose. And so when she's finally like about to leave and he shows her like, okay, now I'm going to show you love. It's like all she can have. Yeah. It's either like she's going to be forced or she just gives in and then she's happy when she wakes up in the morning, like, finally I got attention.
And that actually says...
And that's so dark and, like, disturbing.
There's a lot of things being said about women who are in unhealthy, physically, emotionally, some sort of abusive relationship. And it's just basically being like, okay, this is who I'm married. I'm in love with him for some reason or another, which I think feeds into the fact that we don't know why she's in love with him, because it's like an abusive relationship. You never know why. There's these little things that happen where you're like, where that cause them to think that they're in love at least.
Well, and then she blames herself, it feels like, for everything that goes wrong.
Yes. And so it's just an abusive relationship, and that's all it is. Yeah. And so that's why it's like, okay, so like, I guess if you think technically, yeah, he didn't rape her, but he did. He for sure raped her. She didn't have any other options.
Well, we talk about control again. I mean, he was always in control. She never had any control over anything, even her own body.
it's really remarkable the way that I know nothing about the making of this movie, but the director is a guy. I don't know about the writers, but it's really remarkable the way that they put women's issues or things that women deal with at such a front, because all of those things would make anybody uncomfortable, but it's things that women deal with that we're expected that it's just normal. Like, oh yeah, a guy being creepy at the bar. Like, oh, that's normal. But all of a sudden it's not in this movie because it's uncomfortable.
Trying to think of how to end this. If there's anything else we want to talk about.
So the people who were painting the walls,
yes, I was actually
are if you take the whole, the house being like Earth and Mother being Mother Earth, and so the people painting the walls are environmentalists.
She's like, "What are you doing?" They're like, "We're helping." She's like, "No, go away."
And that I don't like. Towards the I think it's right around the part where she's like about to actually have the baby, there's actually still people in the background painting walls, just doing that.
They're helping.
Yeah.
They're helping. And I think it was that same guy earlier that was like really nice and gave her a drink and was like, also being creepy, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Environmentalists are kind of creepy.
He gave her a drink, then he like does the thing at her, and then he takes another girl upstairs and is like really like I don't know, something about the way he delivers it's okay, it's your room, like that way he delivers that is like weirdly chilling.
He was so calm. Everybody just seemed so
nonchalant.
No, entitled. Entitled. Everybody was just entitled. Everything that they were doing was right, and she's like, hey, you shouldn't be doing that, and they're just like, yeah, I should.
Well, okay, so even though we've established that the house is like her house, kind of, it's like an extension of her body in one sense, or it's hers. It's like it's not hers too at the same time. It's his. And so every time that she says to somebody like, "What are you doing? Like, this is my house," and they go, "What are you talking about?"
That's why I said it was her baby.
Her baby.
Yeah.
Because it's his house that she made a home. So it's them together.
Word.
That's why I would come back to that there's just not one framework that totally encompasses everything. There's so many different things you can apply to this movie. It's so fun. I love movies like this.
I feel like that applies to life.
Whoa. Well, I still argue that it's her body, but she doesn't own it. It's his.
That works too.
And that's super messed up, but it's not hers to do with even herself, even her heart.
And
it's not hers.
She needs to be okay with it. Like, he expects her to be okay. She just goes up to him and is like, hey.
I don't think he wants her to be okay with it. I think that, and I mean, he even says it at one point. It's like, as he's like carrying her charred body up the stairs, and she asks like, "What are you?" And he's like, "Oh, I am I," and all of this had to happen because otherwise it couldn't have happened, and the work wouldn't have worked. It was like he wanted it all to happen. When
I said she had to be okay with it, I mean that he expected her to accept it.
Oh, I don't think so.
Not like be okay, but be like, oh, well, this is just what's happening, so... Yeah.
I think it's actually more like he doesn't even consider the possibility that she could have an opinion other than his. It's that like when he's like, like, of course you can stay here whenever, and she's like, why would you do that? That's crazy. And she's like, well, I don't understand. I didn't think that you would have a problem with that, because he literally can't conceive of the idea that like, she could have a problem with something he would want to do.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I'm getting caught up in. I suppose I was thinking that maybe her emotional responses were part of it, or part of his design. But actually, I think it's worse than that. It's like he wanted to elicit all of these things from his audience, and all of her reactions were sort of inconsequential. They didn't even matter. Like, her responses, even to the people, like trying to stop people from doing things, she didn't stop anything. She didn't change anything. And so her reactions were moot.
Yeah.
Which is really sad. What else? There's one more thing I was just thinking of. It had to do with Mother Nature. I might think about it or not.
I I mean, that was definitely the first time I like, got the sense that the movie was really taking place in some kind of alternate space was when they are carrying the one guy away to the hospital, and you basically see them running away from the house, and then you see the perspective from the woods surrounding the house, and they're just gone. So you're left with either, two ideas. One, they really booked it through the woods.
Right. They just disappeared.
Yeah. And
there's nothing out there really.
Yeah, because the whole world is in that house. Yeah. At least her whole world. I don't know.
Well, you see when she walks out onto the porch, it's like you can't even tell if she's like in the doorway or on the porch. She's just like a little bit outside the house, and she doesn't go any farther because it's like she almost has like agoraphobia or something. Like she's afraid of leaving herself. I remembered what I was thinking about though. So God is redoing this thing over and over and over again. And if we're going to get philosophical here, there had to be a beginning at some point, right? There had to be a first time that it happened where God met Mother Nature or created Mother Nature, and all of this shit went down and it went up in flames. And then he decided, you know what? I'm so sad. I'm going to do this over. And he just like lives in that moment forever because he was like, yeah, that was an experience. And he's like addicted to it. And it's like always going to be the same every time. I think down to the like where he smacks the doorknob and it like falls down. And that's what like starts everything. He invites the people over. There's the doorknob. It ends up being the first murder weapon. And
so is his study heaven?
Or the Garden of Eden.
Okay, because he blocks that off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they broke the fruit.
They broke the fruit.
And when there's a mass exodus of people from the planet, it's the presence of a flood.
It's even raining really hard outside.
Yeah, it is. It's the only time they ever show rain outside, too, yeah. They consumed the body of the sun.
What?
Well, like eating the body of Christ.
Consumed the body. I was thinking the sun because the flood.
Ate the baby, the body. Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
All these things. This movie was really like overt about that.
A little on the nose.
Well, and then with the ink, it was like Ash Sunday or
Palm
Sunday
Wednesday or
whatever.
Yeah,
Ash Wednesday. Yeah.
I know.
And how things get like muddled through time, like the ink on the head, and then it, like the priest, or as his character name is Zealot, starts like
a name.
Yeah, they all have names. Okay, so of course it starts easy, like so. There's mother, him, man, woman, younger brother, oldest son, and then the guy who's like hooking up with that chick in their room, and she's like, "Get out! Like this is my room." Is cupbearer.
Oh.
And the lady is damsel. And then there's consoler, bumbler, philanderer, fool, wanderer, idler, whisperer, adulterer, zealot, defiler, pisser, lingerer, loiterer.
Oh, like a bunch of sins.
Yeah.
All these sinful people.
Kristen Wiig was Harold.
It's a silly name for a lady.
Hark there.
Neophytes. Thanks for listening to this episode of Couch Theater. My guests this episode are Cassi, Gablick, and Tyler Standifird. Artwork by Rupert Lee, or Robot, who you can follow on Instagram at 20th Century Robot. All episodes are written and produced by me, Stefan Cowper, along with a few questionable baselines. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, listen to us on YouTube, or you can follow us on Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, or Twitter, all under Couch Theater. We hope that you enjoyed this episode of Couch Theater, and that you come back next time for another movie and another conversation.
I don't know. I'm not encouraging you to buy more, but I will pound when you do.
What do I get if I don't?
Equal pounding.
That's what she said.
Okay, we need to stop saying pounding. It's too sexual.
It's good for sound check, though. Pounding.